Well, it's the day after. I've already put out a couple videos, but now I've actually had a chance to watch the film. And I had the pleasure of watching the film. It was some fun stuff to take a look at Trey Lance's first home start, his second career start, and really a nice arc of improvement throughout the course of the game against the Texans. So I have several thoughts after watching and then rewatching this once more that I think are worth sharing today. And I divided them up into arrows up and arrows down. By the way, this right here, speaking of great quarterback throws, great quarterback performances in 49ers history. I don't know if Trey Lance's game against the Texans counts as that, but we're still talking about 49ers QBs. This happened 23 years ago today. Steve Young's throw and Terrell Owens' catch ended a deeply personal 49ers-Packers rivalry, the family fight. Maybe we'll see a rematch of this in the postseason, but I don't know yet. Anyway, I wrote about Steve Young and Terrell Owens 3 years ago now on the 20th anniversary, and that's the piece. That's Young against the Packers in 95. There's Owens crying after he made that catch after having just a rotten, miserable day. John Madden announced this game, by the way, with Pat Summerall. And John Madden was going crazy because this was a redemption story for Owens. I think he dropped 4 passes on the afternoon, and then he hauled in the most difficult catch of them all to beat the Packers. And of course, Steve Young and Brett Favre. We talk about quarterback development in 49ers history. Well, this story is a particularly interesting one because in that 49ers Packers rivalry, Steve Young was developed by the Packers head coach because Mike Holmgren was formerly the 49ers quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. And Brett Favre was developed by the 49ers coach because Steve Mariucci had formerly been the Green Bay quarterbacks coach. So there was that crisscross. Everybody knew, everybody else's playbook. The Bill Walsh system was with Holmgren in Green Bay. The Packers tormented the 49ers in the postseason for 3 straight years. And then the 49ers finally got them back when Young threw to Owens for the touchdown 23 years ago today. So if you want to read that, I'll actually put the link for you in the comment section. And then we will move forward talking about this guy right here, Trey Lance. Just waiting for the room to fill up a little bit. The viewership is growing. Last night we set record numbers, which was awesome. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you're part of all these shows, and maybe we'll be setting records by the day this week as the 49ers get ready to play the Rams. First things first, up arrow yesterday for Trey Lance's intermediate slant precision. The throw that stood out to me was the big gainer to Brandon Ayuk. And you have to give Brandon Ayuk a lot of credit for bouncing off a tackle right after he made the catch and turning it into a truly big gain. But if you watch a replay of that, Trey Lance was just precise on the money. He threw a bullet. The arm strength was on full display, and it fit through the defensive line. There's a couple guys who had their hands up, and through that first layer of defense and hit Ayuk in stride. So he helped set up the yards after the catch. The 49ers consistently either lead the league or are in the top 2 or 3 in yards after the catch per reception because that's what Shanahan's scheme tries to design, right? They try to design opportunities for playmakers in space, but it's up to the quarterback to be able to execute that scheme and make sure those playmakers do have those opportunities in space. And I thought that Lance's slant there in the second half to Brandon Ayuk was a huge arrow up for him because we had seen some issues in the intermediate game accuracy for Trey Lance, not only before this game against the Texans, but also during the first half of this game against the Texans. He was a little flighty in the first half, right? He was missing some throws. There were some wobblers coming out of his hand, especially on 3rd and long. But that one throw to Ayuk, that slant that was just a tight spiral, knifed over the middle, that was exactly what the 49ers need within the context of Kyle Shanahan's scheme from Trey Lance. You have to be able to set up yards after the catch, and you have to be able to do it on those intermediate crossers. If you can't expose the defense on intermediate crossers, you have no place in this Kyle Shanahan system because that's the way that it's set up. The outside zone stretches the defense. The intermediate crossers should be there because you have the defense cheating a couple steps to the left or the right. And you have yak monsters. You have guys that are able to deliver after the catch in Ayuk, in George Kittle, in Deebo Samuel. So you have to set up yak over the middle. And I thought that Lance, with those slants, I mean, they were precise yesterday, especially down the stretch after that 2-minute drill in the first half. I thought that he took a big step forward. So that's obviously something that the 49ers have been working on over the course of the past, 11 weeks. We hadn't seen Lance in actual non-garbage time game action in between weeks 5 and week 17. Well, I thought he nailed it. I thought that he was very impressive. And I thought that the release, he had that looping hitch that's even a thing in warmups in practice. I thought that he removed it on some of these throws that required the ball to get out quickly, like the one that I'm talking about to Brandon Ayuk. And that's a big deal because, there was a worry that the loop in Trey Lance's throwing motion was a mechanical hitch that was going to happen on every single throw. But he's able to get rid of the ball quicker. I mean, there was even a little one to JaMycal Hasty. It was a dump off pass. He was the outlet guy when Lance was about to get hit, where he kind of just flicked the ball forward. And, it didn't look too pretty coming out of his hand, but it got some yardage to JaMycal Hasty. And I thought that it was a good example of Lance going off of the script, which worried some people with that lowered hitch. Because anytime you're taking a long time to throw and you're bringing the ball low, you're asking for these strip sack artists around the league to knock it out. I mean, you can't just have it flailing around at all times. But the fact that Lance was able to not do that when, the cards were down, when it really mattered. I'm talking about the throw to Ayuk. I'm talking about the outlet to Hasty. There's several other examples. The fact that he was able to speed up the release, I thought was a big arrow up. And he was able to do it while showing some precision on a couple intermediate slant patterns. To me, that tied hand in hand with Lance's comfort in the pocket. When he was inaccurate for more throws than he was accurate in the first half, Trey looked a little flighty. He didn't look at home in the pocket. And this was a big fear for the 49ers, and I think it was a big fear for anybody who has been following Lance's progression and who was familiar with what set him back in week 5. Remember that the 49ers ran the ball 16 times with Trey Lance in week 5. Remember that he was hit a grand total of 24 times when you count those running plays in week 5. It was not a sustainable game plan, but it was one that Kyle Shanahan felt compelled to employ. And it's one that Trey Lance, really poured fuel on that fire by bailing the pocket and, freelancing running because he wasn't fully ready to deliver a precise NFL game from the pocket. Well, the first few drives of this game, virtually all the first half, it looked like we'd have an encore of that. And Lance couldn't really afford that. Neither could the 49ers because they fell behind 7-0 while he was struggling to figure it out. Obviously, the interception might have been the low point of that all. Play action pass didn't look comfortable at all. Coming off the fake, looked upright, looked rigid, threw the pick to the underneath defender. Bad decision on the play. But in the second half, Lance, he looked at home. And the fact that this game had an upward trajectory as far as comfort level goes, to me, is maybe the most important key that I'm going to talk about in this video, because we see quarterbacks melt down. And the two 49ers quarterbacks who have played this season, they, one of the, I think you could say it's a commonality between them, and maybe it's because of the way they're coached. Maybe it's because they hang out with each other in the quarterback's room. But both Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance have shown a propensity now, and we've seen it from Lance now in 2 games, to not be shaken to the core by a bad pass or an interception. Obviously, Garoppolo has way more experience, so he's thrown way more picks, and he's bounced back from more of them than Trey Lance. But in a sample of 2, Trey against Arizona with the opening drive interception, and then obviously Trey Lance with his interception against the Texans in the second or the first quarter yesterday, he's turned it around both times. I think in Arizona, Lance wasn't equipped yet to deal a full 60-minute game from the pocket, but he played with a lot of heart, and he definitely settled in comfort-wise playing with his limited skill set against the Cardinals. I think people were still encouraged by that start against the Cardinals, even though they knew he had a long way to go. Well, it was very important that Trey Lance show that he had indeed made progress over those 11 weeks against the Texans. And then he threw that interception. And then you wondered how he'd bounce back. Would he look more comfortable, or would he fall off a cliff after that second interception? And it was the very next drive after that interception against the Texans that was a 2-minute drive where Lance finally looked at home. All it took was getting him in the shotgun, firing a few bolts downfield, and 49ers had a field goal, set up a nice second half for Trey Lance that wasn't perfect, but it was a whole lot better than what he started with. So the fact that he was able to overcome the early adversity in yesterday's game from a psychological and an emotional perspective, that you could see the 49ers were responding to him. I mean, the quarterback has to lead his teammates in any game, really, and especially a game like this where there's so much uncertainty. You need, some solid play from the quarterback position. The fact that the 49ers didn't follow Trey Lance into a bad place at the start of the game when he was struggling, when it was clear that the whole team was a little bit off and Lance was part of that, the fact that they followed him out of the rut after that interception, I thought was a big, big arrow up for Trey Lance. Arrow down, Lance's very short game. This remains a concern. And you saw it from, one of the very first possessions in the game where Lance tried to get one to Kyle Juszczyk in the flat to set up yards after the catch. I believe it was a first down play. And he kind of threw this half-hearted wobbler out there that Juszczyk had a lunge down for. He caught and was tackled immediately because he almost tackled himself trying to catch the football. And that ended up derailing a 49ers drive, because if you look at that play, it's very clear that a nice throw in stride would have allowed Juszczyk to pick up at least 3 more yards after the catch. And that would have meant 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4. Instead, the 49ers were in 2nd and 8, so maybe 2nd and 7. But those were 3 big yards because they ultimately didn't pick up that first down. More than once, Trey Lance missed on a throw to the flat. And, it's to the point right now where I watched him through training camp as well, where he wasn't accurate to the flat on some of those shorter passes. It feels like an adventure every single time he's throwing one of those quick passes. And that's just not going to be acceptable for the 49ers if they want to play efficient football moving forward against better opposition. So, Lance's very first NFL throw in the regular season came against Seattle. Remember, in the third quarter after Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt in week 4? And that was a short flat / screen pass. I forgot what exactly the route concept was, but it was only intended, to go about 5 air yards, and Lance threw it into the ground. And everybody said, oh, well, that must be, jitters. And, maybe there still are jitters. He's only 10 quarters into his NFL career. So that might still be a culprit behind all this. But he is also throwing laser beams on some of these intermediate routes. I put the arrow up on the intermediate slant precision. I put the arrow up on the comfort in the pocket. But then all of a sudden, the short game goes a little haywire. And it's just so important that short game is there. Because when you're building the brick of the house, that is the construction of a solid quarterback game, you have to have that foundation. And the foundation is the short game. And especially in Shanahan's system, you're going to have those passes be crisp. You're going to have them set up yards after the catch. And you can't be missing on some of those short passes. Even when Garoppolo hurt his thumb, he was accurate on the short outlet passes. And those were huge. You look at the drive to tie the game against Tennessee. And I don't know if people could appreciate this much on TV, but in person, I had a great angle of this. It was 3rd down, and I believe it was JaMycal Hasty who caught the pass. It was one of the outlet passes, and the 49ers absolutely needed to convert late in the 4th quarter. And the pocket formed, very threateningly around Jimmy Garoppolo, to the point where they weren't about to hit him, but he was going to have a tough time getting that ball out, and the pocket was starting to collapse. And somehow, some way, he was able to slightly adjust his release, and that quick flip of his wrist was able to spin the ball out to Hasty, who was able to pick up the first down, and the 49ers ended up scoring the tying touchdown. And it was a great example of a play that, in the box score will be a throw to the running back, and the running back picks up some yards. Nobody ever thinks too much more about it. But those are the plays that make or break efficiency in the NFL. It's the short passes that set up the long ones, that move the chains, that set up the 49ers' ability to rush at volume. Because if you're not picking up the chains in the short game with your arm, then you're not running the ball 35 to 40 times a game, and then you're not imprinting your formula as the 49ers. So when Lance was struggling with the short game early on, the 49ers weren't picking up first downs, and they were behind to the Texans 7-0. But then in the second half, when he did hit a couple of those throws, but mainly he hit the intermediates and obviously the big one to Deebo Samuel. Once that happened, the 49ers took off. I'm just worried for their sake that when they play better opposition and Lance has to start, which may be as soon as this Sunday against the Rams, if he's not clicking early, and that usually happens through the script that Kyle Shanahan gives in the short game, the 49ers are going to find themselves behind the 8-ball. So this has to turn into an arrow up soon if Trey Lance is starting again next week. Arrow up for Lance's megaphone. I mean, he doesn't have an actual megaphone, but it's starting to sound like it before each snap. This is one thing that mature veteran quarterbacks are really good at and are not appreciated enough for. Mature veteran quarterbacks are able to communicate and, knife through the noise of a stadium, especially on the road. You're going to go silent count, right? But a home stadium's not often fully quiet. There's 70,000 people there. You have to get up under center, or you're in the gun, wherever you are. You have to be able to bark out orders with, the propensity to have them heard by all 11 members of the offense. It has to cut through the sound, right? And you have to be able to get everybody on the same page through the spoken word. Jimmy Garoppolo's voice always popped through the on-field speaker or the on-field microphone that the TV networks would put there. And then even if you were at Levi Stadium, even if you were like me, if you're sitting in the press box behind the glass, you'd still be able to hear the cadence because he had worked on the voice. He had worked on that megaphone. And it was so important to bring the 49ers offense together cohesively. Early in Trey Lance's time with the 49ers, so this was a few months ago, there was a distinct difference between what you heard from Garoppolo and what you heard from Trey Lance at the line of scrimmage. I mean, it was very, very evident during something like training camp. We hadn't seen Trey Lance in meaningful action for those 3 months up until this game against the Texans. And the first thing that struck me when Trey Lance lined up under center was that he started to sound a little bit like Jimmy Garoppolo. And, these are the kind of things that a rookie quarterback can pick up from a veteran in the meeting room and on the practice field throughout the course of the year that he's not going to have right away. I'm sorry, a 21-year-old coming out of college is not going to have that same booming voice that's been trained at the NFL level to deliver in NFL stadiums, as the veterans. It's just not physically and practically possible. So that's something that he has to work on. It's one of those details that people don't pay attention to because it's not all about throwing deep balls and avoiding interceptions. It's about how you command the huddle, how you see the field, and how you communicate. And I think Trey Lance and that megaphone, arrow up for that. This is one thing, by the way, that made Andrew Luck such a hot pro prospect coming straight out of college from Stanford. His dad was a quarterback, Oliver Luck, for the Houston Oilers, so maybe Andrew picked some of it up there. But Andrew Luck was known to have the megaphone in college, and you don't see the megaphone, and you don't hear the megaphone all too often in college football. But Luck was considered so pro-ready in large part because he was such a good communicator already at the college level. That's something that Trey Lance had to work on coming in, and I think it's something that Trey Lance has really showed improvement with, as we saw yesterday. Just go back and watch the game. On Game Pass, you could turn up the sound, put in your headphones, and you compare Trey Lance in week 17 with the Trey Lance we saw in the preseason during some 49ers home games. It's night and day. He's a lot louder now, and the 49ers are better for it offensively. That ties in with this. Lance's command at the line of scrimmage is going to be very correlated, obviously, with how well he communicates at the line of scrimmage, but it's also going to be correlated with how familiar he is with the 49ers playbook and how many situations he has seen over the course of the year and eventually the years. There was a play yesterday, it was a crosser to Deebo Samuel that Deebo dropped, and that's a little bit of an issue. Deebo now has 10 drops on the season. That leads the NFL. Fantastic player. There's been one issue with his game. It's been the drops this season. And one of those hurt Trey Lance on the crosser. But what a lot of people didn't notice on that play, I'm sure, is that Trey audibled into that play. He made a pre-snap check to go into the pass, and it was obviously the right pre-snap check because Deebo Samuel was open and Trey delivered the ball accurately. So that was what was important to me on that particular rep. It showed that Lance has a growing command of the line of scrimmage. And, command of the line of scrimmage, confidence as far as moving chess pieces in the game of football, that so much of that requires going through the fire, struggling a little bit, and then, learning to be confident even through that adversity. And I'm sure Trey Lance has gotten plenty of that in practice running the 49ers scout team against what looks to be a good 49ers first team defense. I'm sure that he got a nice share of it in Arizona where the 49ers lost 17-10. And they were terrible on 3rd and 4th downs, and they weren't good in the red zone. And, Lance bore a lot of that responsibility. I'm sure all of that, since Lance has now been able to overcome it, and he was able to overcome a rough first half against the Texans to be good down the stretch in that Houston game, I'm sure all of that has snowballed and added up into greater command at the line of scrimmage. And it's no coincidence that audible on the good play to Deebo Samuel that ended up in the drop happened in the second half, because that was when Trey Lance was able to find his rhythm. Early game comfort, though, is something that the 49ers are absolutely going to have to solve with Trey Lance, especially if they're going to need him to start moving forward. I bring this video to you on Monday, a couple hours before Kyle Shanahan speaks. So maybe we'll get an update. We probably won't. I think Wednesday will be the nearest update on Jimmy Garoppolo and whether or not he may be available against the Rams. So right now the 49ers are just running with possible contingency plans. And one of them is Trey Lance may have to start against the Rams in what might be a must-win game on Sunday at SoFi Stadium. And, those of you who have been to SoFi Stadium, it's probably the most impressive sporting palace in the world, at least right now. I'm sure they'll build something else in the next couple of years that will be more impressive. But, this place is awesome. It's huge. The scoreboards, it feels futuristic, but one thing is that it could be overwhelming too. You step in there as a player and you're in awe and you're looking around, and especially next week with how big this game is going to be. This is going to be a playoff game. This is two of the, most talented teams in the NFL. I don't want to say two of the best teams in the NFL, but they're definitely both playoff contenders. The Rams are going to be gunning to lock up an NFC West title. The 49ers are going to be gunning to lock up a playoff spot. And if Trey Lance is starting, he's going to be thrown into a world that's a whole lot different than football was at North Dakota State. And I know that Lance has already started a road game against the Cardinals. I know he's already started a home game against the Texans, but this is going to be another step up in intensity. And in both games against the Cardinals and the Texans so far, Lance has struggled in the early going. There's been, there's been trouble when trying to find the rhythm. Thankfully for the 49ers, that trouble did not translate into a loss because they were playing a bad team yesterday. But the Rams won't let them get away with the kind of start that we saw in this game. The 49ers have scored only 3 points in first halves in the 2 starts for Trey Lance, and that's something that's got to turn around. He has to be able to hit those short passes earlier. He can't be bailing and running early in games. And some of this goes on Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan has to be able to scheme some of those short throws to get Trey Lance comfortable. But Lance has to oblige Shanahan when those short throws are schemed, and he has to connect on them. And the 49ers have to move the chains. This was an issue, too, at times early in the season for Jimmy Garoppolo. Remember, he was missing on some short throws early. 49ers couldn't get in an offensive rhythm. Well, all quarterbacks have to find that rhythm early, especially if they're playing a good team. And this is one thing that Lance needs to figure out, because you can't get off to many more slow starts. So this all leads me to the overarching question. When will Lance be able to deliver 60 efficient minutes against the top defense? Against the Cardinals, we saw 60 inefficient minutes against a really good defense. That was in week 5. But we saw a lot of heart from Trey Lance, and the 49ers delivered a great game defensively. So they came up short, but they were close, right? They lost that game 17-10. Against the Texans, we saw about 30 and a half efficient minutes of football, and it was a win for the 49ers against a mediocre to bad defense, right? The Texans aren't very good. So there's progress there because we actually saw some efficiency from Trey Lance this time. But the next step is porting that efficiency over to a full game and also being able to deliver it against better opposition. So that's the big question. Can Trey Lance take some of the success that he saw in the second half against the Texans and apply it against the Rams next week if he is indeed asked to start? And if I knew the answer right now, I'd be rich in about 5 or 6 days or however many days, because I would just go and I would bet a lot of money on this game, and I would win. But nobody knows the answer for sure, because development can be a nonlinear process. It could also be something that, just surges and happens all at once. And Trey Lance can, find turn on the switch. The light bulb can come on for him and he could dominate against the Rams, and the rest will be history. But in all likelihood, this is going to be an incremental process. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be really, really hard against one of the best defenses in the league in the Los Angeles Rams. They have Aaron Donald on the inside, right? They have Von Miller rushing from the outside. They have Leonard Floyd rushing from the outside. They have Jalen Ramsey back there at cornerback, who's going to be roaming around, taking away different parts of the 49ers offense. You have to be smart as a quarterback. You have to be experienced as a quarterback. And you have to have the support of your other 10 offensive teammates to be able to work things schematically against the Rams. This is something that Jimmy Garoppolo deserves a lot of credit for. He's 5-0 in his career against Sean McVay and the Rams, including that win in week 10 for the 49ers this season. They won that game 31-10. Garoppolo was precise. He was able to deliver on third downs, and he was able to set up the 49ers run game for 40-plus carries. The height of the precision in that game from Garoppolo came on that throw of, what was it, third or fourth down, I believe. It was a fourth down, and it was to Deebo Samuel cutting across the middle. Garoppolo threw him open. He threw to a spot. He didn't throw to a player. Throwing to the spot made sure that the Rams couldn't get to the football before Deebo Samuel did, and then Deebo was off to the races for the touchdown. Against bad defenses, you don't have to throw to spots. You can throw to players, and they'll do the job for you. But against the best defenses in the league, you have to win the anticipatory battle. You have to throw to spots. You have to trust your receivers. You have to trust yourself. You have to dissect from the pocket. At some point in any season or in any game against a good team, a quarterback has to become a surgeon, no matter how athletic he is. And I think that Trey Lance started to do some of that stuff, but it came against the Texans, and it only came against the half. He's making progress. It's so clear. From point A in Arizona to point B against Houston, Lance has taken massive strides. It's night and day almost, right, with some of the anticipation. I mean, the throw to Deebo Samuel deep was awesome because he intentionally underthrew him, and at the same time showcased that awesome arm strength to make sure that Deebo Samuel would be the only player able to catch that football, and it turned into a game-sealing touchdown. But despite all that progress, more will still need to be made against the better defense when the windows are going to be smaller and that anticipation is going to have to be greater. So those are my points for Trey Lance. Again, if we want to review them, the intermediate slant precision, I really like that. That's a timing thing. I think Lance has gotten that down. The work on the scout team, anybody who was trying to tell you that Trey Lance wouldn't improve at practice was trying to sell you snake oil, because he's improved over the last 3 months. Those slant patterns are so much better. The comfort in the pocket is so much better. The anticipatory throws, we talk about the Deebo Samuel throw. Those are so much better. That's obviously gotten better at practice, but there's still work to be done in the short game. There's still work to be done in the early game as far as comfort goes in the pocket. And it's so important that this happens, because you're wasting a lot of other efficiency and a lot of other potential upside with Trey Lance if he's blowing it early in games and if he's not able to deliver those short passes. I mean, the guy's got a cannon. The guy's got legs that can evade the pass rush and run away from or trample over tired defenses down the stretch. I see a future in which the 49ers are picking up some big third downs thanks to Trey Lance's legs. He's got a little Deshaun Watson to him, right? With the length. He's got that height, and he's got those long strides. Also has some physicality and has the big arm. You could see how the 49ers like the physical skill set, why they may want to develop him into a player like that. But you don't get the fruits of all those great skills without the glue pieces of the fundamentals and that short passing game early on. The other fundamentals, though, Lance is developing nicely. The megaphone is there. The command at the line of scrimmage is there. And it leads us to that final question. When will he be able to deliver a full 60-minute efficient performance against the top defense? The 49ers might need it now or else they'll be done, right? The Rams are coming up this week. It's do or die time, final try of the regular season. We don't know where Garoppolo is going to be this final weekend. We'll find out more on Wednesday. But it's certainly going to be captivating theater because Trey Lance did make progress in that first start, and the 49ers should be excited about the future. It's just that the present is a lot more murky, but if there's some stuff to work on in the immediate term, that's it. All right, I don't think that I am going to answer any questions, even though there's a ton of comments. Maybe I'll do a separate Q&A on some of this stuff. I did get a tip I saw, so thank you for that. That's awesome. Oh, yeah, it's from Chris. Thanks, Chris. Happy New Year from Visalia. I'm hopeful for Trey Lance. If he can at least end up better than that great number 5 from Gilroy, Jeff Garcia, then the future is bright for San Francisco. Speaking of that, I'm going to get Jeff Garcia on the show. I'll text Jeff Garcia right now. I want to get him on the show. You talk about number 5 from Gilroy. We'll talk to Jeff here at some point because Trey is also number 5, and I'm sure Jeff doesn't mind Trey wearing that number, and we'll get Jeff on here, and I think that would be good for the channel. Everybody subscribe if you haven't yet. There's going to be a lot of good stuff, and yes, you guys are just arguing in the chat, so go ahead, keep on arguing in the chat. Hopefully me ending this video doesn't stop you, and if you do have questions, put a couple of question marks by them so that I actually see them, because I don't even check a lot of my mentions anymore due to all this stuff. Just too many too many arguments. It's crazy. All right, guys, everybody take care. Subscribe, enjoy the videos, and we'll talk to you next time.